제 화면 좀 공유해 봐도 될까요?
네, 가능하십니다.
네. 잘 보이시죠? 큰 화면으로.
네, 잘 보입니다.
네, 네, 넘어가죠. 네, 알겠습니다. 잠깐만요. 다시. 네. 신 박사님 오늘 너무 여러 역할 하시느라고 너무 고생이 많으세요.
아니에요.
지난번부터 왠지 신 박사님이 제일 고생하시는 거예요.
아, 그래도 이번에는 사회도 안 해도 되고 머더레이터도 안 해도 돼서.
아침 저녁으로 이게
날짜가 그렇게 겹쳐가지고.
아주 너무 공부 많이 했습니다.
아, 아닙니다. 이게 되게 생각보다 되게 유익한 것 같아요. 저희한테도.
네, 네, 맞아요. 이런 분들 발제하시는 거랑 오늘 낮에 교육 세션도 진짜.
어제 세션들도 다 되게 좋더라고요.
그쵸.
들으니까. 네. 그 온라인으로 해서 좀 걱정했는데 이것도 나쁘지 않은 것 같아요. 그렇죠?
오히려 또 요즘은 이게 또 나름 장점이 상당히 또 있는 것 같은. 네,
네.
그렇죠.
좀 마음도 편안하고.
집에서 해도 된다는 게 얼마나.
아니, 현장에서 하면 이렇게 낮에 세션하고 밤에 하고 이러기 사실
네.
힘들잖아요. 그래서
네, 네.
이것도 나쁘지 않다.
맞아요.
생각보다 참여율도 저는 보통 온라인으로 저희 센터에서 컨퍼런스 하면
네.
신청자 대비 참여율이 되게 낮더라고요.
아,
온라인으로 하니까 일단 이제 많이 신청들을 해놓고 안
네.
들어오시는 분들도 많은데.
말씀 중에 너무 죄송한데요.
네네.
이거 다 녹화가 되고 있어요. 그 라이브
아, 그렇구나.
스트리밍으로 실시간으로 제공되고 있거든요. 그래서 여기에는
아, 지금도
사람들이
실시간으로
없어도
제공되고 있나요?
네네, 스트리밍 중이셔가지고
아, 예, 예.
사람은 없지만 네네.
아, 네, 알겠습니다.
아, 지금은 일단 사람은 없죠. 녹화해서 잘라주실 수는 없나요?
유튜브에 실시간으로 스트리밍이 이미 되고 있어요.
아, 네.
나중에 그 녹화본 따로 올라가나요?
네, 녹화본은 따로 올라갈 예정인데요. 그때는 제가 편집해서 올리겠습니다.
네, 감사합니다.
네.
잡담하면 안 되겠구나.
네. 홍 교수님,
네.
예, 홍 교수님 저 한 뭐 2, 30분이면은 될 것 같습니다.
네네, 저희 안
예.
그래도 말씀드리려고 했는데요. 잠깐만요. 네네. 지금 오디언스들 좀 들어와 계신가요?
이거는 또 말로 해도 되나? 이거도
홍 교수님께서도 혹시 스크린 지금 한번 해보시려 하시는 건가요?
네.
아, 네, 잠시만요.
아직 안 들어오셨구나. 다른 분들. 저희끼리만 있는 건가요? 아직? 아, 그러네요.
저희끼리만이긴 한데 또 이게 유튜브에는 바로 실시간으로 되니까
스크린 되고 있다고 해서.
네. 오늘 이제 진행 방식은 저희가 시간이 좀 넉넉해서요.
네.
그래서 뭐 너무 막 서둘러 말씀 안 하셔도 될 것 같고요. 앞부분에 제가 오늘은 약간 그 오디언스 분들이 질문도 좀 하시고 화면도 켜실 수 있도록 하는 기회를 약간 드리면 좋을 것 같아서 그 발표를 25분에서 30분 정도 하시고 그다음에 질문을 좀 받고 한 10분에 15분 정도 받고 그다음에 이제 신 박사님이 25분, 30분 발표하시고 질문 받고 그다음에 마지막에 또 질문 또 두 분 공통으로 받고 이런 식으로 해서 그 오디언스 분들이 화면 켜고 싶으신 분 있으면 미리 얘기를 좀 해서 이제 얘기하실 수 있도록 하면 어떨까 싶어서 그렇게
네,
하려고 하고요.
알겠습니다. 예.
네,
네.
좋아요.
됐습니다. 이거 너무 빨리 안 하셔도 될 것 같아요. 저희가 시간이 좀 넉넉해가지고.
네.
좋습니다. 네. 혹시 화면 경고 한 번씩 해보시겠어요? 계속 했어서 큰 문제는 없을 것 같아요. 그쵸?
저 한번 해볼게요.
네.
잠깐만요. 잠시만요.
이거 슬라이드쇼 그 했을 때 저기 스크린 스왑 필요한지 한 번만 봐주세요.
네.
지금 슬라이드 노트로 나오나요?
네, 노트로 나와요. 수업
아,
필요합니다.
수업을 해야 돼. 이렇게 하면 이제 슬라이드로 나오는 거죠?
네, 이렇게 하면 풀돼.
네, 알겠습니다.
정 박사님도 한번 해보시겠어요?
네. 저는 수업 안 해도 되겠죠? 지금
네,
네,
이대로
풀로
진행해
잘
주시면.
나와요.
네네네.
네, 좋습니다. 그 앞부분에 시작할 때 두 분 소개시켜 드리기 전에요. 약간 그 세션 1하고 어제 그 플래너리 세션 1에서 있었던 거 잠깐 테이크어웨이 잠깐 제가 설명을 좀 할게요.
네, 좋을 것
테이크어웨이
같아요.
설명을 하고 오늘 세션 2 들어오시는 분들이 주로 이렇게 저녁에 들어오신 분들이 교육 세션 들어오신 분들하고 좀 다르실 수도 있는 것 같더라고요. 그래서 약간 어제 있었던 얘기를 좀 말씀드리고 그 다음에 이제 저희 발표하는 걸로 그렇게 하겠습니다.
네.
5분에 시작하겠습니다.
네.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to the session 2, the 2021 International Development Evaluation Society. I'd like to ask a bit of a few housekeeping announcements before we start the second session. So our participants who are joining today's Zoom conference, could you please change your name? If you go click in the top of your photo, if you click on the right side, there's a function that you can change your name. So could you kindly use your full name? If possible, if you could have your affiliation in bracket, that would be wonderful. Thank you. And then, and also, I'd like to ask you a kind understanding. Then today, our presentation, there will be 2 presentations today. Okay, I think that some of the people who are joining now, the 2 presentations we are happening today, that will be around the 25 to 30 minutes. So we'll make sure that for each presentation, we'll have around 15 to 20 minutes for the heated debates and a question and answer time. Luckily, this session, we do have quite plenty of time to ask some questions and clarify some of the questions and burning questions if you have. So I'd like to ask you kind understanding that if you have any questions during the presentation, please kindly use the chatting function, the chatting box in the bottom of your Zoom screen. There is a chat button there, so please freely use the chat button during the presentation. Okay, here. Oh, thank you. Someone already uploaded here. I will also say here and hello. Hello. Yeah. So this is the chat box. So if you have any burning questions or some reactions you'd like to share during the presentation, please do not interrupt the presentations, but you can start typing. After the presentation finish, because we do not have a big group today, I think that this is a fantastic opportunity that we can raise some questions. So I think that we'll have a 15 to 20 minutes for each presentation that you can turn on your camera and actually discuss. You can ask questions directly to the presenters today. Okay, so our session starts 7. Now we just started, and we aim to finish by 8:45, so we can have a bit of break time before move on to the plenary session 8. I think a lot of people are logging now, so I'd like to introduce myself first. My name is Moon-suk Hong. In Korean, Hong Moon-suk. I'm working at Busan University of Foreign Studies at the Development Studies program. So I'd like to warmly welcome most of the participants are now enrolling actually. Okay, so now let us introduce what happened in a side conference yesterday and today. Yesterday we had a plenary session. One started at 7 p.m. We had a global trend of international development evaluations. There were three presentations yesterday. It was a bit like a political economy of international development evaluation. And then we moved on to plenary session 1 last night. It started at 9 p.m., but we had a lot of participants, so we were very surprised actually. So at 9 p.m. we had a plenary session, one moderated by Dr. Jung here. And then we had Isabel from the other side of the world, from Europe and UK, and they talked about realist evaluation. So it's very interesting. I strongly recommend you to have a look at the edited version of the video that we uploaded in the future. And then today we had a special education session this morning organized by SITE today. So there was a very informative, and I think a lot of people learned a lot and received a lot of information. Now it's 7 o'clock. We're starting our session 2. We're focusing on international development evaluation in Korea. So we have two amazing presenters today. I think that some of you already joined some of our sessions in the past. You already have noticed who's our presenters today. So each presentation will be delivered, two presentations will be delivered by two presenters. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jung Ji-sun from Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, so KIEP. Did I say right?
Yeah.
It took me a long time to remember the full name.
Yeah.
So Dr. Jung from KIEP, and she will talk about today evaluation systems in Korea's development, especially aid agencies. I think a lot of us actually do have a very vague idea about development agencies' evaluation activities, but we don't know much about the systems. So that will be very beneficial and helpful. And second presentation will be delivered by Dr. Shin. Shin, are you there? Could you turn on your video?
Sorry, I thought you were going to introduce me later after Dr. Jung's presentation.
Okay, so Dr. Shin Jae, she works for Center for International Development Evaluation, right?
Yes.
Okay, so CIDE.
So side with the C.
Side with the C, and then we have the side with S as well.
Yes.
At Seoul National University, and then she will talk about country portfolio evaluation. I know a lot of evaluation, the people recent years been quite passionate about portfolio evaluation last 2 years. So I think it would be really important for us to listen to a presentation today. So I think that without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first presenter today, Dr. Jung. But around 10 people, 6-7 people just log in today. So I'd like to give you one more reminder that throughout the presentation, if we have any questions, please use the chat box. And then after the presentation, you will be given opportunity to turn on your video and ask questions directly to the presenters. So I'd like to warmly welcome Dr. Jung for her presentation.
Thank you, Professor Hong. Let me share my screen first. Can you see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your kind introduction. I can see that we have about 19 people, and this is the perfect number to have a live discussion. So what I'm going to discuss today is evaluation systems in Korea's aid agencies. And I guess many of us have experienced one way or another involving in Korea's evaluation system as either evaluator, practitioner, commissioner, or policymakers, or etc. And my focus will be particularly on the organizational capacity of these aid agencies. Okay, so let me move on. So what triggered my study? If we take a look at this figure, one of the most significant trends in Korea's development evaluation and development in general is increasing number of government agencies and public agencies, ministries at the central level and also agencies at local level, engaging in development cooperation. But while their core organizational function is not necessarily in development, but for various reasons, they've been carrying out development activities, conducting evaluation, not because they want to, but as a public agency, they are required to follow the government guidelines to periodically conduct evaluation, periodically conducting and periodically commissioning evaluation. So what we are witnessing today is that we do not only have KOICA and EDCF, the main Korea's aid implementing agencies, but there are about 28 more additional ministries and agencies that periodically conduct, plan, and commission evaluations, and they also periodically report the findings of their evaluation to the IDC committee of the Prime Minister's office. And these new actors are mainly grant agencies. However, the problem with this trend is that since majority of these agencies and ministries have relatively lack of expertise, experience, and capacities when it comes to development cooperation, there has been increasing concern about the performance of these organizations, performance of their development cooperation. And that led to increasing discussion about the necessity of evaluating their organizational performance. So there is increasing discussion about that we need to periodically conduct organizational level evaluation for these each agencies, particularly within the Prime Minister's office, which function as Secretariat of CIDC. So, okay. So in this background, what I tried to do with this study was, the purpose of this study has kind of twofolds. So firstly, I tried to explore the organizational capacity of Korea's aid agencies. Firstly, to conduct evaluation, focusing on the evaluation quality. And secondly, what is their organizational capacity to use findings and recommendations of evaluation. And accordingly, what I was trying to do in this study was to try to explore areas for improvement in terms of organizational capacity to ensure accountability and learning from evaluation. But what do I mean by aid agencies in this study? In this study, aid agency refers to all government ministries and agencies at central level and also local level that engage in development innovations using government budget, and also conduct or commission evaluation either internally or externally. So these agencies, of course, include KOICA and EDCF under the Exim Bank, but it also includes ministries and agencies other than KOICA and EDCF, of which key mandate is not necessarily in development. Actually, my study relied heavily on literature review with a bit of statistical analysis, and the findings were triangulated through semi-structured interview with key informant, and key informant included policymakers, evaluation managers, and evaluation consultants, and experts from academia. And as a tentative conceptual framework, I tried to pinpoint a couple of elements, selected elements that construct organizational capacity. Of course, organizational capacity is a multidimensional concept, and there are a lot more other factors, other elements that are included in organizational capacity, but I selectively chosen these 4 factors. Firstly, governance, resources, data management, and legal framework. In terms of governance, I tried to look at the organizational structure of each aid agency, particularly looking at the independence of their evaluation unit, and also looking at financial and human resources, whether there is sufficient level of financial and human resources, and also try to look at whether there is a data management system in place, and whether, if there is such a system, whether that system is well functioning. And finally, I tried to assess whether there is enough, whether our legal framework, Korea's legal and regulatory framework, is conducive to create environment for these organizations to ensure evaluation quality, and also to use and learn from evaluation. Actually, this framework was largely drawn from the organizational assessment framework, to improve performance created by Universalia and CDRC of Canada. And also, I also referred some of the element of evaluation system to assess evaluation system provided by the OECD. And also, I also referred a couple of literatures on evaluation quality by Lewis and Schatz. And actually, another thing that I want to emphasize is that this study is intended and designed as a kind of a preliminary and exploratory study to provide groundwork for future and more in-depth assessment study, which I currently trying to conduct right now. Okay. So what are the findings? Firstly, governance dimension. In terms of organizational structure, it was assessed that, just a second. It was assessed whether the evaluation function is separated from the operational function of each agency, looking at the independence of evaluation unit. And unfortunately, the answer was no. Except for COICA, EDCF, COFI, and except for these agencies, and recently also Ministry of Agriculture, it was found that in the majority of agencies, evaluation unit was part of the operational department. And to make things worse, there was no evaluation unit in many of these agencies. So it makes things difficult for this organization to ensure impartiality and objectivity of their commissioned evaluation. Well, and this problem of lack of independence and governance structure is closely related to the issue of human resources as well. Again, in majority of agencies, there were serious problems of insufficient human resources. And in many of the agencies, due to staff shortage, those who are in charge of operation or management will be in charge of evaluation function as well. So operation manager will commission evaluation. So they plan, they coordinate, they supervise external evaluation, and they also screen the results of the evaluation. And this kind of situation makes it easier to influence the content of the content or process of the evaluation, making external evaluators makes it difficult to hold the independence of external evaluators. And in many of these agencies, development is not exactly their core mission, but simply kind of a sub-portion of international cooperation function. So it's not exactly easy to expect these agencies to have sufficient level of human resources to only designated for evaluation function. Another problem, even more serious problem that was witnessed was the problem of lack of expertise and skills or experience among evaluation managers or evaluation commissioners. Largely because of frequent step change resulting from job rotation system. Most of us are familiar with this job rotation system, which is a common practice in any kind of Korea's public agency, right? So the problem was that because these managers, they only have like 1 or 2 years of time span to work as an evaluation manager. So it makes them, it is kind of a difficult situation, difficult environment to accumulate expertise, knowledge, or experience by learning by doing. So, and the lack of expertise of evaluation managers, the skill gap within the evaluation commissioners are often identified as one of the negatively influencing factor of evaluation quality and also evaluation credibility. Then what about financial resources? If you take a look at this figure, the figure is about the annual evaluation budget of Korea's aid agencies as of 2020. So you can see that KOICA has substantial amount of budget that is 1.3 billion Korean won. However, you can see there is a high level of divergence. And if you see the text are too small, but you can see that about 1/3 of agencies are supposed to conduct evaluation, even though they do not have any evaluation budget, meaning that these agencies such like Oceans and Fisheries Ministries or Korean Police Agency or Korean Meteorological Administration, they conduct evaluation, but they do not have any evaluation budget, so they have to use a budget from, I don't know, operational budget or administration budget. So actually, the amount of evaluation budget, average evaluation budget is about 80 million Korean won for all aid agencies, but that number is kind of not correct, because KOICA's budget takes up about the half of the total evaluation budget of Korea's government agencies and ministries. And so if we include KOICA and EDCF, the average budget is, annual budget is about 30 million Korean won. So that is 3천만 원. So with only 3천만 원, these agencies are supposed to commission at least 2 evaluation studies every year. And if we compare the amount of evaluation budget to the total amount of ODA, it's just about 0.1% of ODA budget. And it's substantially lower if we compare the amount with the average amount of the OECD DAC members of evaluation network. So all in all, we can say that there is insufficient level of evaluation budget to ensure the quality of evaluation and to learn from evaluations. Then what about data management? Actually, in yesterday's session 1, Professor Seok-won Lee and also Professor Ju-han Oh have touched upon the issue of data constraint. And in Korea's system, we can see that many of us evaluators have experienced in one way or another constraints in data, evidence data, when you involve in evaluation as an evaluator. So the problem was that in terms of monitoring and evaluation, even though there was certain level of improvement, but still there were a lot, the M&E system was not exactly well functioning. So the situation was that according to the government guideline, all agencies are required to identify performance indicators, output indicators, and outcome indicators when they submit annual ODA implementation plan for each interventions. But the problems with these indicators was that often they lack measurability, and they do not, there is not sufficient consideration of timeline, and this, as a result, that's not exactly applicable. So when we have to conduct evaluation, those indicators are not exactly applicable either. So in many cases, RBM plan is established in a limited way, but the data are not being collected based on that RBM plan. well, we all know that it's one thing to set up an indicator, and it's totally another thing to collect data. And in many cases, the RBM plan was not exactly well established, and it was not, if it was established, it was not well functioning. So the result, what's the result? The result is lack of accumulated evidence data. And without evidence data, we all know that it is difficult to ensure quality of evaluation, rigorousness of the evaluation, and soundness of the evaluation. So all in all, we could argue that, except for some exceptions, maybe in some, I don't know, Koika's case and maybe some of the case of coffee, the data management systems in general are either not well established or non-functional. Then what are the fundamental reasons of such problems? These problems are largely attributable to, again, lack of financial resources, human resources, and also lack of understanding and awareness about the importance of data collection and data management within the organization and across the organization. Then what about the legal framework? I mean, whether our legal framework or regulatory framework is conducive to ensure evaluation quality and evaluation learning. Korea's regulatory framework for development evaluation and also development itself is based on Framework Act on International Development Cooperation. In Korean, that is 국제개발협력기본법. And what was found reviewing in this Framework Act was that there is a strong priority on the reporting requirement for all these agencies, because according to the framework, article, I believe it is Article 16, all agencies are supposed to annually plan for evaluation and implement evaluation and also report the results of evaluation. So they have legal obligation to conduct evaluation and then report the result of evaluation. However, another thing that was pretty obvious from the Korea's Framework Act was that even though there is growing attention on evaluation quality, there was not enough attention on learning from evaluation. So the Korea's legal framework is largely about conducting evaluation for the sake of evaluation, but they do not pay sufficient attention that how we can learn from evaluation. And so much was about what to do for what these agencies have to do, but there is no articles about how much money, how much budget should be allocated for evaluation or monitoring, how much human resources that we should have, or what should be the organizational structure to ensure evaluation quality and learning from the evaluation. So too much on what to do, but not enough on how to do. So all in all, we could say that we do not have exactly conducive environment, legal environment to ensure evaluation quality and learning from evaluation. Then what about quality? Maybe some of you are familiar with CIDC commissioned meta evaluation of Korea's aid agencies. This is a government effort to periodically assess the quality of evaluation report commissioned by all Korea's aid agencies. And according to the result, what was found was that the quality of evaluation reports seems to be gradually improving, which is a positive sign. But still, about 1/3 of evaluations lack quality in terms of their methodological soundness. structure of their, logic of their report structure. And finally, utilization of the findings or recommendations. Many of the evaluation report that was found to have insufficient quality did not have a strong linkage between analysis and a conclusion. So it's like that your evaluation report say one thing in analysis, but the conclusions are not exactly supported by the evidence or analysis that is provided in your evaluation report. Then what are the factors, or what are the determinants of evaluation quality? I mean, according to a range of previous studies, these are the factors that influence that determines the quality of evaluation report. Firstly, capacity of the evaluator, evaluation budget, duration, commissioner skills and experience, and data availability, data accessibility, and finally, organizational culture and leadership of each organization. Then what about youth? In terms of government system, I wouldn't say there was no improvement, because again, the Framework Act on IDC requires all agencies to establish kind of a follow-up plan to implement for the recommendation from evaluation reports. And they are supposed to periodically report how they are progressing in terms of follow-up. However, this is just a government reporting scheme. But I could not find sufficient evidence that evaluation learning or knowledge that was created by the evaluation report was used to improve the programming or management or future decision-making, policy-making process of each organization. And another huge problem in terms of awareness was that maybe except for the COICA, there was not enough agencies or ministries that have sufficient level of awareness or understanding that evaluation is not only about accountability, but it is about also organizational learning. And the knowledge created by the evaluation should be collected, managed, and again, feed it back for future policymaking and future programming. Then what about dissemination and communication? Korea's evaluation seemed to have a really strongly centralized, controlled, and limited dissemination and communication. I mean, the result of evaluations are disseminated and communicated within a very close circle of government level stakeholders, but there is not enough effort to outreach domestic, constituency or civil society or general public. I mean, the information about the evaluation findings or evaluation recommendations are only circulated among the government level stakeholders, but general public, who are the taxpayers, who pays for the ODA budget, they do not have much easy access for the findings of evaluations. Another and even more serious problem that was found was that huge neglect on the stakeholders from the country. In terms of evaluation dissemination and communication, it was found that maybe there is certain level of involvement of central government stakeholders, like Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but there were not enough involvement of partner agency or like local community, civil society, and not to mention, beneficiaries of the given intervention. And Korea, so we could arguably outline that Korea's evaluation effort by the government system only tries to respond to the domestic pressure for evaluation, domestic pressure for the evaluation, but not for the it does not necessarily it does not necessarily meet the information needs of partner country stakeholders, which are another group of huge critical importance. Okay, so to sum up the findings, again, going back to the my tentative conceptual framework, in terms of governance, there were lack of independence, lack of human and financial resources and expertise, and data management system was not exactly in place. And even though it was in some cases that was in place, it was not well functioning. And the legal framework had too much focus on just doing evaluation for the sake of evaluation, but later less focus on how to conduct evaluation. I mean, too much focus on what to do, but not much focus on how to do. I mean, how much budget should be spent, how much people should be allocated to manage and to commission evaluation, and what should be the governance structure, and etc. And most worrisome trend was really little focus or little attention, policy attention or regulatory attention was paid on using evaluation for organizational learning. And all of these problems will negatively influence the quality of evaluation and also use and learning function of evaluation. So these are the lessons or little bit of moderate suggestions for, I don't know, maybe policymakers and those who are interested in this issue. So in terms of legal and regulatory framework, there should be more focus on learning and not only focusing on what to do, but more focus on how to do it. We have to think of a bit, not only focusing on kind of like reinforcing mechanism, we have to try to think of incentive scheme. Actually, I was quite interested to learn about the US government's incentive schemes for each public agencies. And how, while I'm not quite sure whether that case is applicable to Korea's case, but that was a good example. In terms of financial and human resources, we have to allocate adequate level of M&E budget to ensure the minimum level of quality assurance and the right functioning of evaluation. And we have to pay more attention on capacity building at internal level and also external level. And the M&E system, RBN system should be enhanced and they should be functioning so that we can accumulate relevant evidence data. In terms of governance, we have evaluation function should be independent from the operational function. But given the structure of Korea's aid agencies, particularly those agencies with very small evaluation, very small ODA budget or very small portion of ODA compared to their whole operational function, maybe having an independent evaluation unit is not exactly a feasible idea. So even though, in case they still have to dual function of evaluation and operation, So that which will be the case of conducting or commissioning, which will be the case of conducting internal or self-evaluation, then still you need to use expertise from external consultant, because there will be you will have skills gap, expertise gap, which cannot be found within your organization. Now, revisiting the original aim of this research. So, level of organizational capacity of Korea's aid agencies to evaluate and to use evaluation were found to be insufficient. I mean, well, this is a kind of a general statement, but generally, in majority of agencies, they were insufficient in terms of governance, resources, and data management. And we could find there were lack of enabling environment to ensure evaluation quality and learning. So what are the areas for improvement? I mean, we should put more priority on the uptake of evaluation and also learning. I mean, what's the point of conducting evaluation for 6 months, 10 months, or 2 years if we don't learn, if we learn nothing from evaluation? So we have to, when it comes to legal framework or government guidance, we have to combine more of incentive scheme, not only to reinforce these agencies, but to encourage these agencies to learn and use evaluation more in a better and in a more systematic way. And that there should be more effort to communicate more and further with wider stakeholders, particularly stakeholders in partner countries. And there should be adequate level of M&E budget. I believe like at least like 3 or 5% of operational budget should be per intervention, like 3 or 5% of operation should be allocated for monitoring and evaluation, so that we can conduct baseline survey, end-line survey, and you can collect data as part of monitoring process. And there should be more effort to enhance internal capacities of these evaluation managers, evaluation commissioners, with regular training schemes. I think this afternoon's training session provided by SIDE, the SIDE with C by SNU was could be a good example. And there should be, but we have to also think about trying to find, using external expert, like, not only using the internal staff, but outsourcing expertise from the private sector. Now, my final slide is about the limitations of this study and areas for future research. Actually, this study is intended as designed as a kind of policy orientation, policy study. So I need to strengthen conceptual framework, exploring more contextual factors and other missing elements like evaluation culture, leadership, partnership, and coordination function. This study largely relied on secondary data, and some of them I acknowledge are quite outdated. And I must confess that some of the analysis were based on the insufficient triangulation. I'm currently planning on the follow-up research for more rigorous assessment or evaluation of organizational capacity of all aid agencies. Okay, these are my references, and that's all I have to say for today, and I'm open for comments, questions, and discussions. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. John, could you close the screen, please?
Okay, just
Thank you. Okay, here I think we have quite a bit of time, so I'd like to ask if any of you would like to ask a question directly to Dr. Zhang. Could you raise your hand? The function is in the bottom of your the screen. There's an emoticon there, like looks like a smile. If you click there, you can use this function like this. It means that you raise your hand. Okay, so any of you who'd like to, I just changed heart. Okay, that is a little bit strange. Okay, sorry, I will get rid of heart. Okay, would you like to raise your hand? Would you like to ask a direct question? No? Okay, while you are thinking, there's a question arrived here. It says, what are the pros and cons and unintended effects of introducing the recent mandatory reporting of evaluation plan to CIDC?
Well, first of all, pros. Pros is that I guess previously without this mandatory scheme, I mean, but first of all, I guess the question is not only about reporting the evaluation plan, mandatory scheme of reporting, but mandatory scheme of commissioning evaluation, right? Conducting evaluation. So that I believe is the question, the main point of the question. Pros is, of course, I mean, previously, about a couple of years ago, when we did not have this mandatory scheme, except for KOICA, EDCF, and maybe COFI and I don't know, rural development, 농업진흥청, rural development agency, I don't think it was a common practice for other grant spending agencies and ministries to evaluate their innovation, even though they were quite actively engaging in development cooperation. So pros and intended effect is, of course, increase accountability, increase, I don't know, transparency, and increase, yes, and everything, the functions of evaluation. And cons, I don't know, cons and unintended effect. Rather than cons or unintended effect, I would say, I think we, side effects, let's say, side effect of this mandatory scheme is that agencies, they only think about evaluation. But there is, we have mandatory scheme to conduct evaluation, but we do not have any mandatory scheme to conduct monitoring, or no mandatory scheme to, I don't know, to build up evidence data. So there is not enough understanding, particularly within the agencies with small aid budget or small aid portion. They believe that they conduct, they implement innovations, and then they evaluate, and they do not see any linkage between operation or programming between evaluation. And of course, everyone here, I believe that we know that evaluation is part of the project cycle management or program cycle management. So they do not understand, we first need to set up indicator, set up, PCP or PDM or theory of change. We have to collect data, baseline, we have to conduct baseline survey, collect monitoring data and end line survey. Then eventually we will gather evidence data so that they can be a kind of, key ingredient for rigorous evaluation. But government, Korea's government scheme does not pay enough attention about the process, about how. But it just emphasizes on what to do. What to do is for these agencies to conduct evaluation and report the findings of evaluation. And they are not, there is no mandatory scheme to ensure, or there is no scheme to allocate necessary resources, financial resources, human resources, or there is no scheme or incentive scheme to to help to encourage these agencies to gather evidence data and to have a strengthened RBM system. So I would say the side effect is too much focus on, I don't know, maybe accountability, but less focus on how to do it and less focus on the learning purpose of evaluation. Yes.
Well, just in relation to what you just said, I have a quick question. Then, maybe the leaderships of different ministries and agencies, maybe they do not feel that urgency or necessity of maybe spending budgets and the human resources in evaluations.
Yeah.
What are your observations?
Yeah, actually, that has been one of my one of the issue that has been that one of the like my research dilemma, because what I figured out that is the problems with, I don't know, let's say I don't, the agency, the non-COICA or the agencies other than COICA and COFI among grant agencies, as Professor Hong acknowledged, I don't think there is enough leadership or management who understand the importance of evaluation or understand the role of evaluation. But before we discuss about the evaluation, I mean, the aid or ODA itself is really small portion of their, organization mandate. So that's what I was trying to say in the governance or human resource function. I mean, the ODA is just, in many agencies, ODA is just sub-portion of their international cooperation function. So they don't have understanding, they don't have any needs, and they don't have, I don't know, any organizational urgency to ensure, I don't know. So there is accountability pressure externally from the, I don't know, PMO, CIDC, from MOFA or budget office, but I don't think there is any incentive for them to rigorously assess their evaluation, assess their innovation.
All right.
So
I think that we have a couple of more questions came up. I think there are two groups of questions came up. And the first, I'd like to maybe hand over to microphone or video if you like to turn on your video from our participant from KDI. Would you like to turn on? Would you like to speak, or do you want me to read? Does Ms. Sugyong? Okay, the microphone. Okay, so I will read on behalf of Ms. Sugyong. Thank you for sharing wonderful presentation. I have several questions. First, during your presentation, you mentioned that UN uses incentive mechanism, if I'm not mistaken. Can you tell us a bit more about the details about this mechanism? And do you think this is feasible to apply them in Korea? Secondly, what do you think about participatory evaluation, especially with the recipient countries who after the completion of project? Thirdly, I think in Korea there's a lack of time. This is actually true. There is a lack of time to incorporate evaluation results as the new project planned far even before the conclusion of the evaluation. Do you have any opinions on that? While you're thinking, after this, we'll go back. We'll move on to the Mr. Jo Hong-yong's the question. Okay, Dr. Jung.
Okay, let me answer the third question first. I mean, I understand your dilemma that evaluation results, there is not enough time to, if we try to incorporate the result of one evaluation to just to the following project. But what I meant by learning or uptake of evaluation result was that not about individual project or individual innovation, but we have to create what I was having, what I was thinking about is kind of, knowledge management platform, so that you can see a list of recommendations or knowledge created about from the range of evaluation that you have conducted so far within a certain organization, I think World Bank has a really good system of sharing the recommendations, findings of evaluations of from their former evaluation. Then you will find there is a recurring theme that you can find in terms of recommendation. I guess in terms of Korea, the recurring recommendation is about the problems of, cost management, problems of sustainability, problems of, I don't know, let's say, what else? There are a range of recurring themes, and those recurring themes can be created as a sort of a knowledge. And then that knowledge pool, that knowledge platform could be used when you try to come up with, I don't know, new ideas for new innovation, new ideas for next policies. So I was not talking about what result of one evaluation should be fed back to the next intervention. So I was not talking about individual project level. So I hope that answers. And about the participatory evaluation, of course, well, we have to ensure participatory evaluation. And what I was talking about, my research scope is largely about the government commissioned evaluation and the capacity of the government agencies. And government agencies, they have a very limited idea or very limited understanding about participatory evaluation, participatory approach. And they are trying to adopt the idea really in a superficial way, like conducting joint, I don't know. I think Professor Hong has a lot of experience, having to deal with their superficial approach about participatory evaluation, right? Well, it is necessary, but in Korea's public agencies context, maybe except for Koika Coffee, and I don't know much about ADC app, but taking a real, genuine participatory approach could be a bit problematic. And but still, I totally agree that is a really critical way of approaching, to ensure evaluation quality and evaluation learning. And about the first question, I was not talking about the UN, but I was referring to the US system that was discussed in Professor Sewon Lee's presentation yesterday. But actually, I didn't really pay sufficient attention to understand fully about the mechanism. But I believe that such a system was not exactly directly applicable to Korea's context, because given the totally different context or regulatory framework that both of our countries have. But actually there is these very different kind of mechanisms that like incentive mechanism that Korean government is thinking about, that is like linking the result of evaluation to the next year's ODA budget. So they are thinking of a performance evaluation at organizational level. So if there is certain organization or government ministry that performed well, then they will give more ODA budget for the following year. That is the incentive scheme that is being discussed recently. Okay, I think you better move on to other question. Can Hong Young-jo?
Thank you, Dr. Jung. It was good learning experiences for me. And then actually the M&E results would be meaningful when the M&E results be used in the modifying the project design, including the project budget during the project period. But in Korea Aid Agency, I think it's quite difficult. It's not really flexible to change the project plan after the M&E activities. So when I conduct the M&E in the aid agencies, we quite reluctant to implement the M&E results in the project process. So in this regard, could you describe how to implement or how to improve that, how we implement the M&E result in the project period?
Actually, what I was talking about, that evaluation results should be fed back into programming and management and policy making was, again, I was talking about collective result or collective findings of evaluations maybe synthesis findings of evaluations and recommendation should be fed back to, I don't know, upcoming programming or upcoming, I don't know, upcoming innovations. But I guess your dilemma is that as a practitioner, you are required to, use the findings from monitoring. But firstly, if the evaluation that we are talking about is midterm evaluation, then I think there is a good chance and good opportunity for you to use the findings from evaluation to the next phase of your intervention. And in terms of monitoring, let's say if your monitoring data should be showing like increasing trend of, I don't know, agricultural productivity, but it shows decreasing trend, then you will see that there is some problem. Then that is a point that then you will have to decide what to do about it and what is the reason, what is the fundamental reason that there is a decreasing trend. So there are so many ways that you can use the monitoring result and the result of evaluation for your current project. And also there is a evaluation approach called realist evaluation, I think, but I'm not exactly a best person to discuss about, to explain about realist evaluation approach. And I'm not sure whether, Dr. Ho, could you intervene about realist evaluation approach?
Yeah, but I think that there are more questions coming up, so
Okay.
we have a little bit of limited time.
Okay.
But I think with Mr. Jong-young, we could maybe share the presentation PPT file we received from Vogel. Maybe that could be that could be a great source for you to utilize it. It's a little bit, it's more organizational level, more the larger scale rather than the specific project level. But I think that could be a great starting point. But meanwhile, I think that we also have another question from Ms. O. Ms. O, do you want me to read your questions for everyone? Okay,
so my camera doesn't work, but I have a microphone working. So first, thank you so much for your excellent presentation of your research results. I focused on the change of workers in each ministries and development departments in each ministries, because this is probably one of the reasons leading to lack of expertise and also lack of awareness on the importance of evaluation. So would it be better to make a centralized control tower which presents evaluation frameworks and expertise knowledge for those deficient organizations be better than like actually implementing training for workers which will change anyways in a short period in each organization? Well,
I think your idea is some of the your idea is in line with many of academics or many of, I don't know, researchers who has a strong interest about how to improve Korea's evaluation system. I think by centralized control tower, I mean, I guess you are talking about like independent evaluation group or independent agency that are only in charge of, I don't know, result management and evaluation, and that agency or that control tower can take over the function of evaluation from these agencies who do not have sufficient human or financial resources and capacity. And that is one of the ideas that has been discussed among policy arena, again, among PMO, CIDC, MOFA, and I don't know, not much about Ministry of Economy. They are not exactly interested in evaluation itself. But there has been a lot of discussion within the sub-evaluation committee, subcommittee for evaluation, 평가 소위. However, having an independent, let's say, centralized control tower type of independent evaluation agency is kind of a political issue. Because, and that model, I think such a model could be found in countries like the UK independent evaluation, what was the independent ICAI, Independent Committee on Aid Impact, that is UK's not centralized control tower, but independent committee in charge of evaluating not only the work of the former DFID, but the work of all the other agencies. And then we also have Germany that have a similar agency. But politically, I think it is such a political decision. So in every new administration, actually, as a policy researcher over 10 years experience, I think I have experienced 3 administrations, and when each new administration came in, there was a discussion about independent, single aid agency and independent evaluation agency. But I'm not sure it will be feasible in this administration. But there is an effort by led by the PMO, trying to strengthen the function of CIDC and trying to strengthen the responsibility and function of PMO. But that also attracts a lot of controversy from different line ministries. Okay, hope that. So yeah, that's very political. That's my answer. Okay, so I think we have other questions.
I think we all need a bit of a political economy style of analysis for a question. We have one last question from Jiboa. Are you able to turn on your microphone to ask? Okay, I think someone raise a hand. Let me just communicate quickly.
Hello?
Okay, yeah, we can hear you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm in Zambia, and thanks for the presentation. Very informative. I just have a quick clarification on one of your findings to do with the lack of independence, especially on the governance part of majority of the agencies and ministries. That lack of independence, is it much associated with lack of finance? Is there a correlationship which you found that maybe due to limited, because one of your finding again on finance is that there is limited budget, monetary evaluation budget given to these organizations. So is that one of the reasons why it's not independent, maybe for saving purposes of the same agencies, or what? Maybe you can clarify more on that one. Then the other question is, these agencies, apart from not being independent, how have they been doing their evaluation? Has it been themselves doing it, or they have been engaging external evaluators to ensure that there is quality? Because one of the things that there's been lack of quality on the reports which they put out. So is it them who have been doing the evaluation, or there is a room for them to engage external experts? I didn't hear that clarification properly. Maybe you can clarify more. Then the last one is just a general comment to some extent to agree with your findings, especially on COICA, having taken or having more awareness on the importance of evaluation, because I do work for Good Neighbors Zambia, and we currently are implementing a project which is funded by COICA, and I'm an M&E officer, and their procedures and how they want the evaluation work to be done, it's in line with your findings, especially on COICA. I can only comment on COICA. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Ziboa, for your very insightful comments and questions and requirement for clarification. First of all, whether this, about the second question, whether these agencies conduct internal evaluation or do they involve external evaluator? They do both. I mean, those who have certain level of budget, then they, of course, prefer independent evaluation, engaging external evaluators, and that is encouraged by the the higher level of Korean government, I mean PMO, CIDC, and MOFA. But the problem is that, I mean, 1/3 of agencies, they do not have any evaluation budget, meaning that they have to conduct evaluation internally. So that causes a lot of problem. I mean, so in that case, evaluation managers who are often operational manager, they have to conduct evaluation themselves. In many of those cases, the quality of evaluation is not exactly credible, reliable, and there are a lot of problems. And whether the lack of independence, your comment is maybe lack of independence is a lot to do the lack of financial capacity. I think lack of independence is attributable to limited budget, but it is more attributable to, I don't know, first of all, the lack of human resources. I mean, in majority of cases, I mean, those agencies with small budget and small and limited, I don't know, aid interventions, then they have just like 2 or 3 people who are in charge of ODA. So these 3 people, they are in charge of operation, policy making, evaluation, and everything. So it is more about lack of human resources, but more fundamentally, the reason itself is that these agencies, within this agency, whether it is, I don't know, Korean police agency, the Korean meteorological administration, and there are all kinds of different agencies involving in development. And ODA is really very partial function of their organizational mandate. So they only have that. So it is maybe very natural for them to not to have independent evaluation units. So I guess it's not, so that's why that I said in my recommendation portion that maybe having an independent evaluation unit is not exactly feasible or not very realistic. That is a dilemma, but it's a dilemma that's not easily addressed. It's not easily solved.
Okay, Dr. Jung, sorry, but we are running out of time a little bit. So we also want to designate enough time for Dr. Shin as well. Would you like to have just 1 minute, the final summary?
Okay. But what about the question for having, okay.
I think that we could go back to the question for after the Mr. Shin's presentation.
Okay, so yeah, I think there is no, well, so I think enough has been said about my presentation. I think we can go back to Ms. Yu's question after Dr. Shin's presentation. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. And I was very worried that we do not have enough questions today, but I realized that we do not have enough time. Okay, so let's move on to, without further ado, would you like to introduce Dr. Shin's? And I think some of the very critical questions also coming up, so we'll put them all together after Dr. Shin's presentation. We'll go back there. So
Yes,
I have a note on the Habin's question, so don't worry about it. Okay, Dr. Shin.
All right, thank you for the introduction. Let me share my slide. So because my presentation is related to the result-based management of portfolio, so and emphasizes the evidence-based aid management and aid development plan and designs can be relatable to the questions that are raised from the audience. Should I swipe my screen once again? Can somebody let me know? Do you guys see this full screen or do you see the?
Oh, we don't see a full screen.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, that's better.
All right, so I'll try to be quick but then thorough. So I'll talk about country portfolio evaluation. It's going to be like a suggestion of the approach that the Korean agency should take if any of the agency, including KOICA or Exim Bank or other ministries who are performing aid activities, if they were to institutionalize portfolio level management, I think this study can be a good reference. So because every evaluation framework or approach has a theoretical ground or logical backbone that that adds to the feasibility and the credibility of the methodology. So, and I found that policy design theory, which is one of the policy formulation theory, can provide useful and insightful implications, especially for the portfolio level management and evaluation of international development aid programs. The table of contents, I'll start with the background and objective. I'll jump into talk about the characteristics of the country portfolio evaluation, focusing on the challenges and concerns regarding the portfolio level evaluation, and then move on to analysis of policy design theory, how it can provide, how its basic principles and also the processes and its analytical mechanism can provide implications to portfolio level evaluation and management. And I have a preliminary framework that's developed from this study to be shared with you guys, and conclude my presentation after that. So for the background, so as we enter the era of SDGs, the donors are expected to have not just multilateral donors, but also the bilateral donors are expected to have higher accountability, not just for the higher efficiency or effectiveness, but for the interaction between social, economic, environmental development. Because the 2030 agenda is emphasizing the holistic perspective and holistic approach in resolving the poverty problems in partner countries. So meaning that not just multilateral developments, but also the bilateral developments should aim to achieve better alignment between their projects and coherence, both in micro level between the individual projects, but also in macro levels as a portfolio itself. So the problem is, so the donors understand that the holistic approach is being emphasized. They should pay more attention on portfolio level management, but then there's agreement that there is a lack of evidence. There's evidence gap in portfolio level strategy building and management compared to the individual project level management, because most of the evaluations so far has been focusing on the individual level projects and programs. So we have actually many evidences built up. And it's kind of related to one of the questions arised from the audience after Dr. Jung's presentation. But agencies like World Bank and also the 3IE, the Evaluation Institution Research Center, they have built something called evidence map. So for most of the sectors and themes and the objectives to be achieved within that sector, they created this map of evidences. And those evidences are usually the evaluation results of the specific interventions had taken place within that sector. And those they even graded the quality of the evidence based on the methodologies they used to create that evidence. So evaluation methodologies that were used to create that evidence. So, but in terms of portfolio level evidences, they're observing the evidence gap. And that is exactly why the advanced donors are paying more attention to the portfolio level evaluation and management these days. And in regard to that, we'll briefly look at what other advanced donors are doing in terms of the portfolio level management. But before going into that, I want to define the country portfolio to get here before we move into the further study. Because country portfolio can mean some, can be different, can be understood that differently for other many other stakeholders. Because before we used to carry out country evaluation or program evaluation, but country portfolio evaluation means something else. So from ODI, I actually brought this definition from ODI. And from its recent publishment, it defines country portfolio as the international development work that are funded by a single development agency. So regarding this agency, Dr. Jung has provided definition right before. And it also has to cover multiple issue areas within a bounded political and geographic territory. So country portfolio can be a group of projects bundled together. It can have vertical lines of accountability to an overarching organizing entity and should share a core unifying element, although the specific objectives and interventions of each project can be different. So that we call country portfolio in this study. And because we don't have time to go over each institution, but if you are curious, you can email me separately. So I did review about what other donors are doing in terms of their portfolio management. And I found that all these institutions are performing some kind of portfolio level management. Some are doing it as a review. Some are doing it. Some are reviewing their portfolios within their midterm reviews, or they're doing it annually, or they're doing it more thoroughly, like every 5 years or 10 years. And although they share the core objective, their specific objective of the evaluation portfolios or review of the portfolios are different. The criteria were also different. There is no standardized or conventional methodology that they are using and being shared. And they're carrying out this evaluation or review in different timing and different cycle. But then the shared objective and shared element of the portfolio level evaluation or portfolio level review is that it focuses on the relationship between the objectives in different levels within the portfolio, not at proving or confirming the outcome of each project. And they all aim to produce and learn from the credible evidence. By credible evidence, we mean the results of the review or evaluation. So they can it can be reflected into the portfolio level decision making. And also these evidences are also utilized to search for new and better development opportunity within that partner country. So under this kind of backdrop, this research aimed to identify the appropriate approach for Korean development agencies' country portfolio evaluation or country portfolio review based on the implications from policy design theory. So in order to do that, first I reviewed the characteristics of the country portfolio evaluation or review, mainly focusing on the challenges and concerns. Also identify the appropriate evaluation approach, and analyze the basic principles and processes and analysis mechanism of policy design theory, and how it can be applied to the evaluation of portfolios. And based on that analysis, the study suggested direction and approach for the country portfolio evaluation of Korea's development agency. So because I already covered the shared characteristics, I'll just briefly go over it. So the evaluation or review of the portfolio usually emphasizes the strategic relevance of the projects or programs composing the portfolio. By strategic relevance, it includes, by assessing strategic relevance, it includes the assessment of the overarching objective, the portfolio level objective. It can be a strategy, portfolio level strategy, which works as the standard for the project selection and alignment of the portfolio itself. And also it assessing strategic relevance also includes the review of the necessity of redefining or reforming or changing or bring about just brand new overarching objective of the portfolio. And it will inevitably lead to the change in theory of change in portfolio level. So, so as I reviewed what other donors were doing with the portfolio management, I found that they are mostly focusing on the assessment of the relationship between the portfolio level goal and objective, and the objective of the different the sub levels. It could be sector level, thematic level, or project or program level. So the relationship between those different objectives in different levels with the portfolio level strategy or goal. But then there are many challenges and concerns related to the evaluation or review of country portfolio in managing country portfolio overall. First is that we need to clarify the definition and objective of the country portfolio evaluation and management. So let me show you this. This is the purposes of portfolio level analysis and management suggested by the ODI. It's a research institution in UK. And it's basically, you can see they're suggesting 8 of them. So for each agency, when they try to institutionalize the management, portfolio level management, they should define and clarify what kind of objective they want to achieve when managing or evaluating and analyzing their portfolios. So based on the objective that they define and clarify, then they can define their definition of country portfolio evaluation. Because the reason I'm putting this in the first category is because in this field, the country portfolio evaluation and country portfolio review are used in mixed terms. So some countries say they are doing CPRs, some countries say they're doing CPEs. So I try to find the clear boundary between the two, but it looks like the boundary between the two is very vague. But usually the CPE means rather in-depth, summative evaluation type portfolio level evaluation involving assessment of the overall performance as well. And they often involve the application of DAC criteria in addition to other standards such as coherence or complementarity. But then compared to CPE, CPR is often more leaner. So they, how should I put it? It's more like and another difference with CPE is usually taking place in every 5 years or 10 years. But then CPRs are leaner. It's more like a brief review, diagnostic review and assessment, and it takes place annually usually. And it focuses strongly on relevance and strategic management issues, including coherence, coordination, and complementarity. But there is an agreement that CPR itself is not sufficient enough to produce credible and in-depth evidence to be utilized in decision making. So they're saying even if the agencies are performing CPRs every year, it is recommended that they complement it with periodic CPEs or other program level evaluations to complement the depth and quality of the evidence. So that's number one. Second is a concern rather than a challenge. It's that the agency who's carrying out this country level portfolio management should have a clear understanding that portfolio level evaluation is not something to solve everything type evaluation. Not because it's a high level and broadened evaluation doesn't mean that it will create broadened evidences. Because the country level portfolio evaluations should focus on the relevance and more on strategic level coherence and consistency. The evidences produced, the data produced by CPEs or CPRs are limited. So in order to improve the management of individual projects or programs, the agency should continue carrying out the individual level project level evaluations as well. Thirdly, it's related to the methodologies. It's a challenge. Another challenge, the third challenge is that the portfolio level evaluation cannot be carried out by applying the traditional, one of the mainstream methodology, which is counterfactual approach. Due to the different characteristics and objectives, the counterfactual approach is not feasible to evaluate the portfolio level evaluations. The main reason is that it's because the target of the evaluation is not just one intervention, but a mixed intervention. And it has a problem with it has an issue of multiple causation. Aggregation of evaluation results of individual project is not feasible because it doesn't include any interactive or counteractive effects, possible effects, contradicting effects. And also with the counterfactual approach, it cannot provide enough information and evidences regarding the effect of contextual factors, which is crucial when evaluating the portfolio, country portfolio. So we have a problem with using the counterfactual approach, meaning that we have to apply something else, which I suggest a generative approach. I won't get into the concept of generative approach because Dr. Vogel already provided an in-depth lecture on it yesterday, and we also went over this during the training session. So if you are curious, if you want to even learn further about the generative approach, you can refer to the recorded YouTube files, I guess. And lastly, it's also a concern. It's that country level portfolio is not something static. So every 4 or 5 years when the donor country's development plan is changing, or the partner country's development plan is changing, or even not just in 4 or 5 years, but in between when there is a dramatic change in political or social situation in the partner countries, then there is a need to update or improve or reform the already existing portfolio. So in order to do that, in order to periodically update and continuously improve the portfolios, there should be clear standards or principles in designing portfolios that even if there is a rotation of human resources within the agencies, there won't be a chaotic situation when changing the portfolios. So those were the challenges and concerns that I identified with previously analyzing the policy design theory. So definition of policy design theory. So I personally encountered with this theory when I was doing other evaluation projects. It was for the domestic ministry. But I found it very useful and feasible to be applied to the international development evaluation, especially for the portfolio level. So you can just read through the definition, but I'll go over this important part, which is the design, what it means by design. So policy design is one of the policy formulation theory, but then it uses the term design because it emphasizes that these bundled or combined policies are how should I put it, combined in a principled manner with clear intention and considering the mechanism operating from the diverse instruments interacting with each other to achieve the policy goals. So basically, this theory is emphasizing that when the bundled or combined mixes of policies to be implemented, they should be designed considering the causal mechanisms behind these instruments and the possible interaction and possible contradicting or synergy effect between these instruments. And because and I thought I figured that country portfolio design is an international development field. Country portfolio design process and output, which is the portfolio itself, it can be regarded as policy design because it's a bundled or packaged project intervention sharing the higher level portfolio level objective or strategy. And it requires evidence-based decision making. It should involve rational and intentional design-oriented process instead of just individual selection of the programs, and with the agreement and coordination between many different stakeholders, partner countries, partner agencies, decision makers within the agencies, practitioners in the field. So considering all of these characteristics, I think it can be regarded as different type of policy design, different from decision making based on political or economic interest. So if country portfolio design, developing country level portfolio can be regarded as policy design process, I thought principles and processes and the analytical mechanism of policy design can be a good implications for the country level portfolio evaluation or review or management. So when for the process of good policy design, this theory emphasizes, interestingly, as a first step, the evidence building and collecting knowledge and evidence. And then they set a goal and objective. And then based on the objective, they recommend matching the appropriate policy instrument or intervention to achieve this. And in order to do this matching, they should collect the evidence first, because that with this evidence, they can match the policy instrument that is for sure to produce the intended objective. So this process is basically emphasizing the mechanism-based thinking for policy design analysis, which is the base of the generative causation. So generative causation, I don't want to go too deep on this because we already went over this yesterday and this afternoon, but it's the inference mechanism for theory-based evaluation or realistic impact evaluation. And it asks, instead of what works, this is what counterfactual approach asks, but it asks how it works and in what kind of causal process it's working. So, well, it's not even practical and feasible to apply a counterfactual approach for the evaluation of portfolios, but it's more by applying the generative causation approach, we can produce more in-depth and useful evidences by carrying out the portfolio level evaluation. So being rooted on the evidence when selecting the policy tools and instruments is making sure that policy combination of the policy has the lowest possibility of theory failure. So you have to understand the difference between theory failure and implementation failure. So when you guys probably are all familiar with the theory of change in project level or program level. So I'll explain with that level. So let's say you have a project and you develop the theory of change based on a bunch of literature review and based on evidences. And you are 100% sure that if the project can be implemented based on this theory of change, you will produce the expected outcome. And then you did the project, you implemented the project, but then you found out that you didn't get the expected outcome. Then it can be either one or both. It can be failure in the theory, or it can be an implementation failure. So theory failure is when your theory of change was not actually credible. So if theory of change is not developed based on enough research and evidences, there is a high possibility of theory failure. And the sad thing about theory failure is that you think you did the right, you implemented in the best way. You on a budget, on time, you were on plan, but then you still didn't get and there was enough participation from the local beneficiaries, but you didn't get the outcome. Then there's high possibility of theory failure. But then for implementation failure is when your theory of change is perfect, you are 100% sure that this project works, but then there was something wrong in managing the implementation process, and there's not enough participation, there's not enough coordination, then it can lead to the failure. But then portfolio level evaluation should not be focusing on the implementation failure. We are not trying to find out who did wrong when implementing this portfolio, but what we are trying to find out is whether this portfolio is designed right from the beginning, and it was designed with enough credible evidences so that the theory of change of this portfolio was credible from the beginning. So the process of policy design reflects how this policy design theory is emphasizing the mechanism-based causation and mechanism-based analysis. And the principles of policy design, this theory suggests its consistency, coherence, and congruence. So by consistency, it's the consistency between the policy tools. So in terms of international development, it could be consistency between the projects or programs. For coherence, it's the ability of multiple policy goals to coexist with each other. So there's no contradiction within the goals and objectives within the portfolio. So these goals, the sub-goals within the portfolios are coherent with each other, leading to the unilaterally leading to the higher level goal. Lastly, the congruence is the ability of goals and instruments as a unit work together in a unilateral, directional, and mutually supportive fashion. So I'll explain these principles with the diagram. So here it was to explain the process. So actually, in the advanced donors, based on my review, they have already adopted generative causation approach for their country portfolio review or evaluation. Most of them build portfolio level theory of change, and they try to identify the associated assumptions within the portfolio level theory of change. And with their evaluation and review, they timely update their TOC, and they change their assumptions when they find that's not relevant anymore. So that's what they are already doing. But what this analysis of theory, policy design theory provides, it's the more solid theoretical ground and the logic for the framework. So am I running out of time? So let me finish in like 2 or 3 minutes. So in sum, the policy design theory's suggestion of process and its design principles and the mechanism-based thinking and causation for policy design analysis provides important implications for the identified challenges and concerns for country portfolio evaluation. This is the relationship. I try to make a diagram out of it. And this is the preliminary suggestion of country portfolio evaluation framework from this analysis of policy design theory. So this is not something that I'm saying that, oh, they should adopt this, but this can be a good reference if any of the agencies in Korea are trying to institutionalize portfolio level evaluation and management within their operation cycle. And it's suggesting that the main objective of portfolio level evaluation should be producing credible evidence and information to improve design and management of the country portfolios. It should aim to assess the theory failure instead of implementation failure. So the focus is not pinning out who is responsible of what's going on, but it's more on evidence building. And the way of this framework works is by testing whether the development portfolio design and development of this portfolio was taken place based on the normative principles. And I brought these normative principles from the policy design theory, of course. So this is the process that I suggest from this study of the portfolio level evaluation. And oops, I didn't intend to hide this with this. Well, I have to bear with it, I guess. And this is the suggestion of the, I try to draw a diagram with the evaluation standards, or each of these could be the major principles when designing the portfolios. So here, the portfolio level strategy or goals should be developed based on the partner countries' needs and their development strategy, Korea's own policy and strategy. This was something like the global society's trends and principles. Also, we also have to take into the account what other donors are doing in that partner countries. So those kind of environmental and contextual factors should be relevant with the portfolio level strategy. And when there's any change in these factors, there should be reform or improvement or updates on this strategy. And the coherence should be measured and evaluated between the goals. The consistency should be evaluated between the projects who share the same sub-goals. And the efficacy, which is this means that whether this project, when selecting or aligning the projects, the choice of these projects for whether or not were based on the credible evidences. So if this type of intervention is already proven to be effective, and there's many evidences produced by rigorous studies, then we can say that project has the efficacy. By congruence, it means the combination between the sub-goal and multiple projects. And these are one unit, and how these different units are congruent with each other, and also with other what other donors are doing or what other local governments are doing in combination of goal and instrument. But of course, these are not the final. You have to cast the practitioners and the agencies based on their specific objective of the review and evaluation. They should customize the standards. I also try to develop specific evaluation questions for each standards. And this is what I'm considering to do for my further research, because there is a modern principles for policy design, which are maximizing complementary effects, goodness of fit, degrees of freedom. But I feel like if they could be a supplementary evaluation standards or elements to be evaluated, but then they can be also covered by reinforcing or strengthening the specific evaluation questions of this each standards. So that's what I'm trying to work on for next few weeks before I finalize this paper. And in conclusion, I did an in-depth analysis of the policy design theory in an attempt to elicit useful implications in country level portfolio management and evaluation. There should be more study to be done in developing the practical way of developing portfolio level theory of change. Of course, there is many areas to be tailored and customized by the actual practitioners and the owner agencies. But I think the study can be a good reference and implications for whichever agency if they are trying to institutionalize the portfolio level management. Okay, did I take up too much time? So this is what I prepared. Should I close my slides?
Yes, please, Dr. Shin. While we have a bit of time still, so we'd
Okay.
like to accept a few
Good.
questions. While our audience is now typing their questions, I have one quick burning question.
Sure.
What context did the Korean government and aid agencies intended to introduce portfolio evaluation? It seems like the last 2-3 years, there's been a few numbers of portfolio evaluation is being introduced in Korea. What context?
I think they're trying to be in trend with the global, I guess, global agenda, because it is widely agreed by the major donors. But as you're probably familiar with the international organizations, how they have been already managing their projects and programs in portfolio level from decades ago. But that was not going on. That was not something practiced by the bilateral donors. But with the 2030 agenda, and because of this pandemic issue, and they are running out of time to achieve the SDGs, I think many donors are realizing that they should take more holistic approach in implementing their projects and programs to maximize the complementary effects and synergic effects to shorten the time to achieve the SDGs. I think it's their attempts. Interesting thing is for DFID, when I was reviewing what DFID was doing, they were recently quite pretty much criticized by the independent Commission for Aid Impact. They do annual evaluation of the DFID. They were highly criticized for their not achieving value for money in portfolio level. So now the portfolio level management has become one of the criteria for the organization evaluation. So I think it's the main trend that's going on in this field.
Thank you. Any other? We haven't actually received any questions yet in the chat box, but I think this is a very, the portfolio evaluation is quite a heated issue last 2-3 years in Korea among the evaluators, yes. But maybe it's not so familiar with some of graduate students.
Exactly.
Could anyone would like to turn on your microphone and have some comments or questions? Okay, if we don't have, I think that in order to conduct this portfolio evaluation, you need to have a lot of data from the donor agencies and the agencies. And going back to the our colleague question from data access issues, the previous question from Ms. Yu Habin, I think that could be a question could go for you, Dr. Shin, also Dr. Jung as well. So, you know, she asked that there is more demand from the public for ODA accountability. It may lead to improvement in Korea's M&A system, but what are the factors preventing the public to access this data, or even evaluators or the public to access this data that generated or contained within institution and agencies? Is it a language problem, or is it a political problem? Are there any cultural factors? Dr. Jung, would you like to go first?
Okay. Okay, thank you, Habin, for your quite interesting question. I think mainly it's because of this culture of not allowing failure. Because in Korea, particularly in development, not only in international development, but in all public arena, project failure is considered as personal failure of project manager.
Oh, we fail all the time, no?
Yeah, but there is not enough understanding about, particularly in development, we tend to fail, but not because of because of the factors that managers can control, but because of all the other factors that is not exactly controllable. But there is this culture, we do not have a culture to learn, but we have this culture of name and blame, naming and blaming and penalizing the project failures. Might result in the budget cut of the following year. And another factor that I believe that is that these agencies, the aid agencies and managers are not exactly sure about the quality of their evaluation report. So they are not exactly very proud. So they are quite reluctant to ensure the open access. And third, and quite surprising factor that I believe is because of lack of understanding or awareness among these evaluation managers or operation managers that aid evaluation report should be open, it should be transparent, but shockingly, I don't think there is enough understanding among, these managers about that it should be open and it should be publicly accessible. So that's my answer.
Okay,
I have
Dr. Singh?
additional comments. I feel like there is the reason for the culture penalizing culture, who did wrong, who did what, and who did wrong, is because the evaluation is still regarded as some kind of auditing in Korean society.
Definitely.
And there is a lack of understanding of the theory failure and implementation failure, even among the evaluators and also among the program operators and practitioners. So when they have clear understanding of theory failure and implementation failure, then they should be more focusing on, put more efforts on designing the program itself. And when they try to pay more attention on designing the program theory and project itself, then they will realize that they need more evidences, more credible evidences. And with that kind of acknowledgement, I think it will foster more active evaluation and sharing evaluation results. But right now, the evaluation, usually project designs are not usually based on evidences or results. So there is no acknowledgements of this needs of more evidences, more credible evidences. So when there is a realization of the need of evidences, I think it will naturally ignite the evaluation practices among the agencies by themselves.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, we do not have much time left, so I'd like to wrap up our session 2 today. And I have received a few DMs, direct messages from some of the participants today, and that they were a bit surprised that we do not talk about PDM anymore. So I think that our participants are very familiar with using PDM only, but we are talking about theory of change here, and we're now only talking about counterfactual framework. But today and yesterday we talked about generative evaluations a lot more. So I think that we appreciate the diversity of diverse evaluation frameworks and methodology and tools. I hope that you all enjoyed the second session, and that I think that I will pass my microphone to Professor Kwak. If you are here, or we have actually 3 minutes. Would you like to take a break for 3 minutes? I think the Matt's already here, so maybe we can continue. Hello, we can continue to next session. So I think a lot of us been waiting for a long time to hear from you. So I'd like to pass microphone to Professor Kwak.
Okay, thank you, Professor Hong, and all the participants who actively engaged in a heated and heated discussion in the evening session.
Do we clap together?
Yeah, a lot of clap for the warrior from 7 o'clock. Okay, now it's 9 o'clock news. Well, you can go to your washroom and you can take a little break and nap and have a cup of wine, whatever you like. And now, but the session will start. So, as I was introduced, I'm honored to moderate this second plenary session of SIDE 2021. And we have a very special guest speaker, who is Dr. Mats Harsmar, who is a Deputy Managing Director, that means number 2, at the Expert Group for Aid Studies, the EBA, which is a Swedish government committee charged with evaluating and analyzing Swedish international development cooperation. Meaning that Swedish government established an independent agency responsible for evaluation of its foreign aid. Dr. Hasmar has previously held various other positions, such as the head of the Swedish embassy in Burkina Faso, chief analyst for international development issues at the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and researcher and research leader at the Nordic Africa Institute. And also he holds a PhD in rural development from Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. I think he's an academic, he's a policymaker, he's an evaluator, as well as he's a practitioner. So he will be enlightening us with a very special topic of how the evaluation, especially the Swedish government position in the COVID-19 situation. That means what is going on in the world of evaluation under the coronavirus situation. Okay, the floor is yours. Mats, just go ahead.
Thank you so much, and good evening. I understand it's evening at your place. I'm a bit coming later in time here. I'm really happy to be with you tonight. It's a pleasure for me. I'd like to start with just introducing a bit this peculiar entity of EBA by showing you a film, and I hope it will, if I now can share my screen somewhere. Hello. I'm sorry. I made a mess of things here. I'm trying again.
Take your time, don't worry.
I will share my screen and show a short, very brief film, which I cannot.
On your bottom, there's a share screen function.
I find the share screen function, but I don't find the thing to share. So I will just set myself up a little bit better by opening that box.
But plan B would be one of us to share your presentation file for you.
I will manage in a while, but you have
don't worry.
Bear with me in just a few seconds more. Now I'm getting close. Share screen. I close that one and I will share my screen. Does it appear here somewhere? There we go. I think I will full screen and then the film for 1 minute.
Okay.
You will please read the text. So that was an introduction of the EBA, and now I'm happy to share some thoughts with you. I hope that you can see my screen now. Is that all right? Yes. I've been asked to talk about how to maintain quality in evaluation in the COVID-19 period from our perspective here in Sweden. Last year, the EBA spent some time in developing policy on evaluation quality, and we then built upon some key principles that were developed by the Joint Committee on Standards for Education Evaluation, which is a US-Canadian organization. They came up with some principles already in 1994, and they had worked quite intensely for actually a couple of years to come up with these principles. And they defined what evaluation quality is. And I thought that could be a good starting point for our discussion here today. So these four basic principles for or criteria for what quality in evaluation is are utility, accuracy, feasibility, and propriety. What does that mean then? Utility, this has to do with whether the evaluation is useful or not. It should be useful, informative, and timely. It has to do with relevance of it. Because of this, at EBA, we put a lot of effort in communicating results from evaluations, but also bringing in stakeholders, those who are to learn from or those who are to be held accountable, to bring them in during the evaluation process. We work with reference groups, for instance. We do special sessions with policymakers when we have results, etc. So we try a number of things. We do also podcasts and actually films, as I tried to show you, even if I'm not the most talented in managing those films. So utility and evaluation needs to be useful. Accuracy, I think that is what most of you would tend to think of when we talk about evaluation quality, because the evaluation needs to provide credible and reliable information. And sorry. Sorry. Hello. I heard a voice. I need to check now.
Okay.
Sorry, Jae-sung, are you?
Yes, sure.
Are you with me? Because
sure.
Something peculiar happened. I seem to be also logged onto another meeting at the same time, which is very peculiar. So if I try to close down that one, you are still with me there?
Yeah, sure,
okay.
Sure.
So I should concentrate on doing one thing at a time. We were here. I started to talk about utility and then came to accuracy. So I'll continue. Sorry for this very peculiar mix-up. It should be reliable, the evaluation. Sorry. Something is.
Yeah. Do you want to log out and come enter again? Log in again?
Something happened on my computer. So, okay. I go back again. Sorry, I'm so sorry about this.
Maybe
now-
Matt, you played the video previously. Maybe
Yeah,
the video could be still
also-
running.
there- it
could
was
you shut
another
down
video.
yeah,
Yes,
other screen.
you're understanding what's happening. So I've shut down the video player now.
Yeah.
Okay. When thinking about evaluation quality, most of us tend to think, I guess, that the methodology and the accuracy part is the most central. And it is, of course, very, very important. But there are also other aspects, and we go on to the feasibility of an evaluation, because an evaluation should be conducted cost effectively, it should be practical and appropriate. It has to do with resource use. We should not waste resources unnecessarily. Propriety, when doing this evaluation, you should always follow the laws, and you should treat stakeholders ethically. Stakeholders' rights, their security, and their dignity must be upheld. So when thinking about the COVID-19 crisis, I think that all 4 of these criteria are relevant for us to consider. So I'll spend quite a few minutes on the first issue here, which might surprise you, but I hope that the argument might come through. Utility. So I think we should ask ourselves, what are the likely effects of COVID-19 in those countries and areas where the Swedish or the Korean international development cooperation is ongoing and the programs are active? Because COVID-19 has an impact on many activities and many plans. For instance, national development plans to achieve the Agenda 2030 are or will be withdrawn. Donors reprogram their activities, and the effects of ongoing development programs will change due to COVID-19. As the major function of evaluation is to assess and help improve these programs, evaluation has to focus and be attentive to and move along with such changes. So we could then think a bit, how could COVID-19 affect socioeconomic development or have socioeconomic effects? And we find 3 main challenges. Of course, the first one comes through the immediate health effects. People get sick and ill, and many people actually die. But there are also indirect other health effects. Other diseases may not be treated in the same extent as before. There might be psychological health risks involved by lockdown, which is the second transmission channel. The lockdown, which has been massive in most countries, impacts on domestic production, of course. People lose their jobs. Companies have to close down. Domestic demand is decreasing because of that. And certain sectors are affected more than others. The closing of schools means that we have lost opportunities for education and lost groups of students. They lose knowledge. The third transmission channel would be effects from the global economic crisis. Through commodity prices and trade, mainly. We can have a look at the effects of lockdown, and this is just one indirect way of looking at it. A year ago, the IMF projected that global GDP growth would be 3.3%, positive outlook that was. And then just a few months later, that had been adjusted downwards to minus 3% growth. It continued down to minus 4.9%, and this is global GDP outlook. October adjusted upwards a bit. We don't have any later figures. I haven't found them anyway. So we don't know where we stand today, but at least in Europe, we've had a second wave of COVID effects. So at our end of the world, things might be much harsher than this even. And that translates into development in other areas. And the most obvious one is, of course, poverty and the evolution of poverty, which has been decreasing globally for quite some time. These projections from the World Bank shows that we now for last year can see an increase in poverty again. We have at least 3, possibly up to 5 lost years in poverty reduction. The blue line here is the baseline, whereas the orange line is the worst case scenario. So somewhere between 88 and 115 million people more have become, are now living in poverty than before COVID-19. And this is spread differently in the world. South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa are the regions most seriously affected. So we see that for Sub-Saharan Africa here, the increase actually is an increase in absolute numbers of poor, and also in the share of poor. Another effect of COVID due to lockdown and travel restrictions, etc., is that remittances are likely or are shrinking. And these are flows to low-income countries that are increasing, or middle-income countries that are decreasing, most severely in South Asia, but also East Asia and the Pacific. In all regions, actually a decrease during 2020, but expected increase. But we'll see, because we don't know about COVID, how it will evolve. These are just some negative effects of the COVID-19. Another one would be the increased foreign debt burdens that we see in low-income countries. This comes about through a combination of economic stimuli packages at national level and losses when commodity prices go down, when trade decreases, when tourism decreases heavily, remittances go down as we saw, and also foreign direct investments, portfolio investments, etc., are very likely to decrease. And this time around, we had this debt crisis in the 1980s and 1990s, which basically was resolved through negotiations in international fora. This time around, the creditors are different. So China plays a much more heavy role in this, and private creditors are also involved. We have less of structured facilities for debt renegotiation this time, but we'll see how that can play out. Another area is healthcare. which is costly in many places. And with the COVID crisis, the access to healthcare is decreasing. And we know that poverty can easily lead to, health problems can easily lead to impoverishment. We have this saying, one illness away. If one member of your family falls ill, you spend your resources on recovery, and that can imply that you lose your ability to earn further income in many places. The closed classrooms, may we lose even generations here, and especially when people are coming back, will the girls come back to school in the same extent as before? There is a gender issue involved there, which is quite severe, I think. Fragility and violence. We know that domestic violence is increasing during lockdown, but we can also see that there are risks for conflicts at a more macro scale. And we know that the trend is that more and more of people living in poverty are concentrated to situations of fragility. And the increasing authoritarianism, this trend which is ongoing, which is strengthened by the COVID crisis. We see there has been tracked events here, and 146 countries have enacted 385 measures that affect human rights in a negative way during last year. There have also been violations of democratic standards. And we have actually in Sweden an institute called the Varieties of Democracy that also tracks these evolutions. It's University of Gothenburg which runs this institute, political science there. So here is a map of the violations of democratic standards that took place between March and December last year. This is based on expert assessments, but there is a very developed process for this. So there are a lot of experts in all countries actually doing this. So it's the data is quite reliable, and you can, by the way, see that our country, Sweden, is here at the same level as your country when it comes to minor violations of democratic standards. The problem is that those who have authoritarian tendencies tend to use this situation to expand their influence. Swedish International Development Cooperation is quite heavily geared towards democracy support. About 1/3 of total bilateral support from Sweden is democracy support. So here at the EBA, we just finished a major evaluation on the effects of democracy support. That evaluation found small but positive effects. One other finding was that there are no negative effects from democracy support on democracy, which has been claimed. So that has now been refuted. But that support is most efficient when given in situations of democratic progress, and less so in cases of democratic backsliding. So there is now a case to reconsider that program. Now, what all this, what I've said about utility boils down to is that we need to think about the evaluations that we initiate. Are they relevant? Are they relevant in the current situation of COVID-19? And can we do evaluations that are relevant in this setting? If not, there is an international coalition, the COVID-19 Evaluation Coalition.org, that have put together briefings of findings from earlier evaluations that are especially relevant in the COVID-19 situation. So I just wanted to point to that website. We have also contributed as EBA to those briefings. So there might be a way of using evaluation results even if we cannot do exactly as we had planned. But in this situation, we need to think thoroughly about what evaluations to start and how to design them in order to be relevant. Moving on to accuracy, where perhaps the sort of harder core of quality in a way might be. COVID-19 poses some challenges to us. And the first and obvious one is that we have more difficulties in collecting data in lockdown and with travel restrictions. But there is also another challenge posed to us, and I think that is controlling for the influence of COVID-19, because it is something that impacts on so many parts of society that historical data might be biased here to some extent. And when we use that, we need to think carefully of how to do that. But first, to start thinking about data collection. How can we get by good data in this situation where we cannot travel, we cannot meet people as we used to do? Of course, as we do right now, we use this VoIP, voice over internet protocols, the Skype, the Zoom, the Teams, the Viber, Messenger, WhatsApp, etc., for interviews and for also software for online surveys. And that is useful, and we can use it in much more intelligent ways than we have thought of earlier. There is one example of a Norwegian evaluation on climate and forest programs in Brazil and Indonesia that were faced with this problem. And what did they do? Well, the program to be evaluated was a program on finding out about deforestation done by businesses that are active in areas which are really risky, such as palm oil production, soy cultivation, beef, cocoa, or coffee, where the risk of deforestation is severe. And how could the program help stop that deforestation? So this should be evaluated. The team and the evaluators decided to do all meetings involved by video. But how to get data? They engaged local consultants to spend extra time in reaching out to beneficiaries and also train them in using tools for video conferencing and internet platforms, and also do verification visits in corona-safe ways. This was not ideal, but it was a way of dealing with the situation, which was promising and worked still. So another way, of course, is to use local and natural evaluators as they did. It might be that such evaluators need to build further capacity, but they may also be better placed due to their local knowledge, due to their language ability and their connectivity. So to identify and connect with stakeholders, local, national evaluators is a rich source. And we can actually rethink our way of using international consultants to such high extent. Is that really necessary? Is it even the best way? So we have an opportunity here. If these evaluators can work in a corona-safe way. A third approach might be to use geographical information systems more. Geotag data is available. There is an organization in the US called AidData, which is quite advanced in this. We worked with them for an evaluation of a local democracy support program in Cambodia. They worked then with geotag data, with project documents, and also remote sensing data to observe nightlight. So they had time sequences of nightlight in the areas concerned. And through these different data sources, they could establish a story that showed effects from the actual program. Investments were done, local people took on various challenges, and you could see that the development unfolding resulted in increased nightlight from those villages. So geocoded data might be useful. There is also an increasing discussion about artificial intelligence and machine learning, but that is basically for data analysis. You see text as data. So there you need to have very large databases, and you need also to put a lot of energy into the interpretation of results and the data. And at times you need to know what to look for. So I would not put so much emphasis on that in this context. Moving on to the question of controlling for the COVID-19 effects. We all know that isolating treatment effects is always difficult when there are many factors at play. And now it can become even harder because people's behavior might change, and it might change in many different ways. What used to work may start to work in a different way or not work at all. So can we use historical data? It might be biased because it comes from a situation which was functioning in a different way. Take a very simple example. We have often thought that building a road, a rural road in particular, would have poverty reducing effects because it stimulates trade and economic growth through increased mobility. But now if consumption is becoming more internet-based by lockdown, this effect may change. And what we saw as a baseline is perhaps not any longer relevant in that way. And this would impact on most methodological approaches, I think. So we might have to rethink our theories of change. We might have to think harder about statistical approaches, how to design them. Are there methods that are better than others in this respect? We often say that the RCTs, randomized controlled trials, and the quasi-experimental approaches are strong, but they need to be well designed, and they need to be applied to relevant questions, relevant situations. Another approach which we have studied a bit and worked with is what is called QCA, qualitative comparative approach, which means you work with that for smaller n sets, and you can it's a combination of quantitative and qualitative approach. You can walk in between the quantitative approach and the qualitative, and you can combine it with other methods, for instance, theory-based methods. So what I would say is important for us now is to focus on methodology and learn about different methodologies and improve our methods. Of course, that could have a price of cost as well, because if we become more method heavy, it can also be more resource consuming, which moves me to feasibility, the third criteria of evaluation quality. If we now are to use more local consultants, if we are to use methods that are more heavy in resource use, would it be still relevant to do these evaluations? And what would be the absorptive capacity of intended users? Because evaluations need to be put to use. And if policymakers, practitioners are very busy in dealing with the crisis, will they be listening to what we have to say? That is a very relevant question to ask ourselves. And will the alternative approaches we choose, will they incur additional costs? Moving on to propriety, we need to design evaluation processes that doesn't do harm. And here, obviously, we can do harm by spreading the virus. So we need to think of every chain in the evaluation. How do we deal with it in a corona-safe way? And for us sitting far away from where things are being implemented, it's easy to send someone and ask someone to do a job. But if we are not ready to travel and take risks, we should not put others there to take such risks. So we need to think very carefully about how to make sure that the coronavirus is not spread, and that the evaluators and the stakeholders are in safety. So the do no harm principle is so important here for us. Just to sum up a bit, there are some questions to ask to ourselves. When thinking about evaluation in these days, should we adapt the themes? Should we do it differently? We at the EBA might be well placed to do that because we don't have any actual evaluation plan. We have prioritized thematic areas, but we don't plan in advance in the way that many other evaluation units do. So we can be flexible. Others might have more difficulties in doing that. But I think that flexibility is essential in this period. Then the second question, not everything is feasible, but can we improve what remains feasible? Yes, we can, by using digital means. We can also find ways around the infeasible by using geocoded data or remote sensing, other ways of gathering data. Perhaps tap into alternative sources of evidence. That is possible. But the question of avoid doing harm, that lingers on and stays with us. I think that is actually the most important question to ask, and I don't have any good answer. I think we need to work on it constantly. So those were my thoughts. Thank you for listening, and thank you for bearing with me all the technical struggles I had in the beginning. I hope you could follow in a decent way anyway. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt, for your
Stop sharing.
very, very nice synthesis of what you've been thinking and what we are facing in terms of the challenges in the world of evaluation these days. So, audiences, please, if you have any questions or comments, please leave something on the chatting board. And meanwhile, I have a little comment and maybe an information sharing about what I have recently heard from one of our partner countries in Southeast Asia. In the first part of Matt's presentation, you have mentioned many different kinds of environmental challenges, the settings that the COVID-19 have reshaped. And one of the new kind of challenges that many developing countries are facing is financial crunch of many governments. Already they are vulnerable in terms of public finance, but they are even more vulnerable this year, especially 2021, because they spent a lot in coping with the COVID-19 situation last year. And this year, the budget was filed, but a lot of departmental ministries were notified from the Ministry of Finance that they are not capable of supplying the budget, at least in the first quarter or half of this year. So they should stand on their own foot. Many departmental ministries were asked by the central government as well. So many organs, many agencies are now become penniless. And some of them are thinking among themselves about auto-financing, means arranging a loan from the private bank with a private collateral. And I asked them, why are you thinking of that? You're already public agency, that you should be able to arrange something from the government or any public entities, public financial institutions, for like imminent or emergency loans or something. But many of them ask, they have no experience of it at all, and they have no facilities under these emergency situations. And if they don't conduct the planned activities of this year, and the next year situation, 2022 situation, will be even worse. That means if they don't do anything, they are not able to file any budget for the next fiscal year. So I think many of them are facing this kind of situation, and that will critically undermine the sustainability of many projects that we have conducted. For instance, Korean government have supported many training centers in the partner countries, and those training centers are very fancy, modern, and fully equipped with modern gadgets, and staff are capacitated, and they was handed over a couple of years back, and then they have no budget to run. And if they don't run this institute, and then they will not be able to even file the budget for the next year. So this is completely a new situation. The center was running okay, even if they were in short of the budget, but now they are in a very, very critical juncture, I think. I don't know what would be the situation, what would be the solution, or be the way out that they can handle this. If we evaluate this later stages, then that will be exactly the situation that you have mentioned in the first part, completely new situation. Those public institutions not capable of coping with this new environment. So we don't know yet. We are not facing the situation yet, but the evaluators this year or next year or year after will have to consider a lot of things and many new kinds of factors that you have just listed on. So Matt enlightened us by waking up all those issues that we thought it may not be possible, may not work, but it will be undermining all those effectiveness and sustainabilities in the forthcoming years.
A comment on that, if I may.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I showed some curves on the expected poverty evolution, but these forecasts are built on modeling which was done previously, and the things that you talk about now would imply that there are additional factors that we didn't know about and those who sort of created the models for the forecasts didn't know about those. So we need to rethink here.
Yeah.
We don't know yet. We don't know what will happen, but it's likely that things like that would happen. And the question of financing. I just read a book by an American economist, which seems to have been advising President Biden, because Biden is pushing forward a program of $1,900 billion, I think, which is huge. Will increase the American budget deficit massively, but the U.S. might be able to do that because they have a central bank which print money, and as long as they don't run into inflation, they can do it. But there are so many governments which, in one way or another, are dependent on their currencies bound to any other external currency, or don't have that control over their own, don't have that ability of sort of just printing money. So problems with indebtedness will be quite heavy, quite difficult for so many countries, I guess.
Yeah, definitely it will affect the public finance situation in general, but the impact would be likely to be uneven. For instance, there are essential spendings, like you have to pay the government offices. So you can still get salaries. But there was a training center about 100 miles away from the city center, and about 10 government officials are working, and the annual budgets, nobody cares.
Yeah.
So you can just pay to the government officials, but there's no running costs. And then, so many institutions like this will suffer mostly. And then, well, maybe those in the social welfare system in the extreme rural areas, or those healthcare centers, primary healthcare centers, is really already heavily under financed, and then we have more problems. So impact will be more uneven. It will damage more to the base of the pyramid, I think. I'm very closely monitoring this situation, actually. I've never heard this kind of thing. But this is pretty much a new thing. What I have heard about the director of the department, the thinking of arrange a private loan from the private bank. Isn't it shocking? Yeah, it is quite shocking.
And I think our role as evaluators is to follow those evolutions quite closely, to see what the policymakers, what action is taken, and see what we can contribute by evaluating the new programs, trying to see what unfolds. There is one concept of ongoing evaluation that we sort of walk with the actual implementation, and there is a sort of well fleshed out methodology for that. So we can do that. But we need to be attentive and listen carefully to what is happening, I think.
Another thing that actually the very important point you have mentioned is accuracy issue. Still, there are a lot of evaluations ongoing, and then internet-based. So we are pretty much doing this kind of Zoom style interviews, or we hire local consultants, and we do even the text mining using Google's and all others, and try to extract them. But well, interview is okay wherever you are, and then you can get some insights or whatever method you are using. But in terms of this quantitative data or text approach, I think it's very unstable. Recently, we were asked by our aid agency to conduct a survey with regard to the usability and marketing effects of a project that we have supported. And we were asked to punch in the keywords of Korea or healthcare or whatever in their newspaper site. And then I don't think it's the right way to do it. And I mean, if you want to do it, you have to design it very carefully. You cannot just punch in Quaker or Korea in the newspaper site. And then, so we are having very serious, like, accuracy issue. So my question is, how are you coping with this issue? What, any other discussions around in your institutions or Swedish circle of evaluation?
Of course, this is a very hotly discussed issue, what to do. And we try to look into every ongoing, all of those evaluations that were started and all of those that we start. We asked this question: how will your evaluation be affected by COVID-19? I think we are still not, we can find ways around it, because we have a special place in the sort of evaluation world in Sweden. We are not doing project evaluations. We tend to focus on more general thematic issues. We tend to do things that others are not doing. So we are a bit of a strange bird in that sense. So it's easier for us. But I mean, the SIDA, which is the implementing authority for Swedish Development Corporation, they have an evaluation unit as well. I think they are more plagued by this problem. How to do it. And as you say, you do your best, but maybe you should even at times abstain of doing evaluations, because if you cannot live up to a certain standard, to a certain level, what good is it? I mean, if you come up with something which is not accurate, not reliable, then you might do harm. So it's a difficult position to be in. I see there is comments coming on the chat function.
Okay. If there's any comment, then you should take a look at it. This is very long comments.
Yeah.
Would you like to turn on the microphone and then say, echo your question? Jo Hong-young, please.
Yes, please.
Yes,
Dr. Hosmer,
yes, sir.
thanks for your meaningful presentations. Actually, when I was in Bangladesh last year, some humanitarian actors in Cox's Bazar in refugee camps, they asked whether it's okay to utilize refugees as an investigator in the Middle Line survey, as it's impossible to enter the camps during the lockdown. At that time, there were lots of discussion on the ethics and morals issues of evaluation method. And then even the Bangladesh government, they never allowed them to use refugees as an investigator anyway. And the Iman, a religious leader, or the male group, they quite hesitate on the female refugees be a investigator in the camp. But due to the COVID-19 situations, partnership with local M&E partners or consultants is quite inevitable. But with regard, what kind of like ethical considerations when we conduct the M&E activities in conflict or fragile status from Swedish experiences during pandemic situations?
Oh, thanks for the question. It's a tricky one because I don't think we have any better or any sort of ready set answers to it. It's a contextual issue. For instance, the male-female part there. Of course, our gut reaction would be to treat everyone at equal footing. Female investigator is as good or perhaps even better sometimes. So for us, we would of course try to find some way or discuss and try to find some way around that. But of course, with engaging with the imam there, at this, when you have a government who sort of hinders you, it might be very difficult to do things. So you might need to either say that we couldn't find this information because we were hindered in that way, and see if there could be some other way of finding relevant data. So there's no easy solution to it, I think. But I think you're right that you need to go local. You need to collaborate and see what you can find there. And it might involve a lot of negotiations with the involved partners, but there's no way around that. So you need to engage with them and see what their arguments are and try to convince them that this is something which is good for you if you allow us to do this work. Because generally I think that's the case, that you benefit from evaluation. Even if the results are negative or critical, you learn and you can move on and you can do things better. So if you present it in that way, maybe you could get some leeway with the local partners there.
A little bit of an addition to your comment is, even if you work on this refugee camp, there should be a way that you first hire a qualified investigator or consultant, like in a more formal circle, and then he might have a solution to address those challenges. Yeah, their way of doing business, including their ethical issues as well. So, even in non-COVID situation, what generally you do is you hire the main consultant, and you contract out the lump sum way, and then the local consultant will hire his workers and co-workers, whoever he likes. This is you. Actually, they are extremely skillful, because Koreans, we are not that much experienced in hiring local consultants yet, but many of the people in developing countries, they are extremely experienced in working with aid agencies and they have their way of handling the business.
Of course, every evaluation situation includes those difficulties of various sorts, of course, but you need to be able to negotiate and convince people that they are to participate, and that so you need to work in a formally correct way, as you said, but also have a certain skill in sort of convincing and portraying the objective of the evaluation and what the results are. A problem might be that we sometimes fly in, take data, fly out, and that is to be avoided. We should, as much as possible, feed back results and what we learn, to bring in those who are concerned, to have this stakeholder approach throughout the process, so that we don't do things for people, but with people.
Okay. We have another question here. Miss Yu, would you like to speak up?
Sure. And it would be nice if I show my face as well, because we have a special guest. I didn't expect my camera to be on tonight, but yeah, let me ask you a question. First of all, it is nice to meet you, and thank you for your presentation. I'm quite optimistic. Well, not about the coronavirus situation, but if I am being optimistic now, saying there's no financial barrier conducting project and evaluation, and if there's enough personal protection equipment to recruit local or national evaluators, is it really feasible? Maybe this question relates to the question asked by Mr. Do, but my question is more soft. So I'm talking about responsibility. I think this is a good opportunity to really build capacities of local people, especially working in this field. But then at the same time, I believe that they can be more effective working with local people. But from our side, we're giving local evaluators, national evaluators, responsibilities on to carry out our task on behalf. So how should we deal with the responsibility issue and trust between international agency and local evaluators? Is it really feasible to recruit them, considering the trust and responsibility issues? And I have a small comment. Have you ever thought about using a drone to maybe capture images or record videos? Because I've seen a lot of articles that students from Africa, like in Rwanda or in other countries, like students started to use or being trained with drones. So maybe it's not ethical, but it could be a possibility, because we have to make sure not to risk local people if they're being implemented in the project site. So could we possibly use those kind of high technologies? Yes, so that was a little, not stupid, but like cute question for you. Yes.
Thank you. Very interesting idea there to use the drones. I think we should be open to all kinds of methods and techniques and tools. We can find data from various sources these days. People carry with them things that leave traces, which could result in data which is useful. But the question is, of course, ethical. Do people know that they leave these traces? How can we sort of work with them so that they agree to us using that kind of data? The drone question is there as well. If people see something above themselves, what does that mean? Do they understand what it is? Why it's there, etc. So we need some kind of agreement with the involved people, so that they agree that, well, this is because of the COVID situation that we collect the information this way. If we can find that, fine. So the technical and the social go together. So we need this respect and this agreement from the people. And I think maybe I'm touching on your first part, on the first part of the question there as well, because the relationship between international donors, between international evaluators and local, has to be respectful and an agreement, so that we work together. And I think if we, as coming from outside, the donor side, if we can show that we see the competence of local consultants, that would help quite a lot. Because at least from Europe, we have this historical tendency of seeing ourselves as superior, which we're not.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Perhaps, yeah, as we are in the final stage of the session, then I'd like to take this opportunity to ask some questions with regard to the Swedish evaluation system before we set METS 3. And you have mentioned, and when I visited EVA, that also I learned there is a division of labor between the SIDA and EVA with regard to the scope of evaluation. So I understand the SIDA is responsible for project evaluation, whether it's completion or export, activity. But meanwhile, EVA is more on the program or sector or like more based evaluation. So how do you coordinate each other under this different governance?
Yeah, this is the we have a system in Sweden which is a fairly small ministry which provides the budget for the development cooperation, and also a letter of appropriation to the implementing agency, and that is SIDA. So there's this fundamental difference. But this ministry is responsible for the part of development cooperation that goes through the multilateral system. So, for instance, when we support the World Bank or the UN organizations, that's the ministry that takes those decisions. So it becomes even more complicated in that way. And we, as the EBA, we stand outside of that. So we are independent, responsible, answering to the ministry, but outside of the ministry, and independent in deciding what to look at and how to do it. And we try to there's a lot of informal contacts just to coordinate so we talk to people at the ministry quite often, at least once a week, I'd guess, sometimes more often, depending on the issues, depending on the themes we evaluate. We talk with colleagues at SIDA very often. And then there are more formal meetings as well. In sort of, we leave a report of our activities to the government, and we present that report as well to SIDA. So we coordinate quite heavily, just to see that we don't do double work, and that we keep our independence, which is important in evaluation. Yeah, so it's a system which is built from the Swedish governance system. So it's a bit different from other countries, perhaps. I guess the reason why the EBA could be seen as an analytical unit, and if you have a small ministry which is responsible for the totality, and you have a large implementing agency, the implementing agency can become quite strong. And the tail might wag the dog, so to speak. And in those situations, it's good to have someone, a separate unit, which you can listen with. Ask, well, they say this, is it really so? Kind of. So the division between three entities here have various advantages.
Okay, to bite the long and big tail. There is Eva, I guess. So my understanding is if you conduct evaluation by Eva, for instance, climate change interventions by Swedish government in one of the African countries, you also consider not only SIDA project, but also your trust fund in Multilateral Development Bank and your contribution to UN agencies, and all those Swedish money channeled to the particular sector in the country are considered in a more comprehensive manner.
Yes.
I think this is a very good practice that we can learn. So as we don't have much of this, well, we can consider our bilateral approach, many different kinds of advocacy, but we don't in fact consider our contribution to the multilateral agencies.
No, I think it's a problem there, challenge or problem, that we have this bilateral collaboration program through SIDA, and then we have some support goes through the multilateral organizations. So Swedish money may end up in the same country in different activities, and it's a bit difficult to see, because if we put it through the multilateral system, it's more difficult to trace the money, because we mix it with Korean money and other countries' money. But still, it's worthwhile trying, because coordination is a very important thing in development cooperation. And we often compete, but we perhaps should cooperate more.
Yeah, I think you open many of those reports from your website as well, and you can download. And there are many interesting reports published by thematic evaluations by Eva.
Yeah, and also actually methodological studies, not many, but a few. I mentioned the QCA, for instance. I think we made a report on that. I don't know if it's visible, but one report a couple of years back. So you could find methodological reports there as well. We are currently working on one, which will come out in a couple of months' time, I think, on theory-based methods. How to do that, and as we use international consultancy, good quality people. So we try to produce quite as good as possible reports. So that could be useful for others as well, I think. Feel free to use. We put in on the cover that our reports are what it's called. It's called licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International, which means that you're free to use it, whatever way you like.
Okay, great. Thanks for the insight and information. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's already 10:15 p.m. in Korean time. And I understand a lot of our colleagues have participated from 9 a.m. There was a full day session of CIDAR. And tomorrow we have also very interesting session exclusively dealing with COVID-19 situation. And from the policy evaluation to the project evaluation, or general situations that all the partner countries are facing. So we will have a more diverse discussion from 7 p.m. here. Matt, you are free to join us again tomorrow.
Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me. It was a really pleasure to think and discuss with you, and wish you all the best with the sessions tomorrow. And sorry to keep you awake so late.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for the participation, and thank you very much. And see you soon. Hope to see you in Stockholm or Seoul in the near future.
Yes.
Okay.
We hope for that. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Good night.